Hi everyone, I'm Kevin Shively. I lead marketing here at Ally.io, and I would love to welcome you to an awesome roundtable discussion today. So today we're going to talk about rolling out and most importantly, operationalizing OKRs across every department in your company. And honestly, it's primed to be one of my favorite webinars that we do because I get to do it with some of my favorite people and chat about how we use OKRs across Ally.io. So you may be thinking, but wait, Kevin, what are OKRs? And if that's the case, I'll give you a quick primer here. So OKRs stand for Objectives and Key Results. It's a framework for organizing and focusing work around the most important parts of your company's mission and the long-term outcomes that you're trying to achieve, your objectives. So those objectives are your North Stars. They're where you want to go as a company and are generally intrinsically tied to your company mission. Your key results are your roadmap. They're how you get there and how you know you've reached those goals. So actually, as I was sitting down for this webinar, I realized that I'm drinking out of a coffee mug with a Charles Bukowski quote on it that says, "Genius might be the ability to say a profound thing in a simple way." It's one of my favorite mugs, but it's also one of my favorite ways as I'm thinking about this to summarize the OKR framework. So it takes your complex and comprehensive and broad business strategy, and it organizes it into the simplest structure and the most important components. So OKRs, first made famous by Andy Grove, CEO of Intel, has been popularized by their use at Google and Microsoft and Twitter and Slack and countless other companies, which is great, but how do they actually work in practice? So we're gonna do a little bit of a role play here. So first of all, let's say Balaji, who I'm gonna introduce in a second, owns an ice cream store. Now, as a business, he'll wanna have 3 to 5 company objectives. One of those objectives might just be to make tasty, delicious ice cream. And that's fantastic. But another one might be that the ice cream shop is profitable. So let's focus on that one because it's a little bit more simple. We can all grasp what that means. The company results would be the measurable pieces of that. So let's say the first one is to sell $50,000 worth of ice cream. And actually that's not fair. Balaji, you're very ambitious. Let's say it's $10 million worth of ice cream because this is fake anyway. So key result number 2 could be to keep operating expenses under $10,000 per month. So if I'm Balaji's store manager, the sales key result becomes my objective. So now I can take that down to the individual level. I can break it up into key results that help me quantify that further. So how many scoops of ice cream do I need to sell? How many ads do I need to run in order to generate the foot traffic that we need to sell those? But ultimately, whatever those key results are, they need to pass what we call the necessary and sufficient test. So first of all, if I hit these key results, will I hit the objective? Are they sufficient for that? And number 2, do I need to hit all of these key results in order to hit my objective? Are they necessary? So if you ask yourself those 2 questions about the key results that you're putting together, you will ultimately build a much stronger OKR program. Now, on the other side of that, let's say that Julie is the CFO of this ice cream shop. Now, I'm not sure why an ice cream shop actually needs a CFO, but Balaji is a pro. I'm not here to question his motives. Julie's primary objective is to keep operating expenses down. Now, there's a very good chance that there's going to be some overlap between Julie and myself for this OKR, because if I'm the store manager, it is going to be really hard to keep me from eating all of Balaji's tasty, tasty ice cream. So that's going to be a factor in this operating expense OKR that Julie has. Okay. Now, one more thing about OKRs. OKR adoption is a process, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed if you don't feel like you have everything nailed down on day 1. There are a lot of lessons that you're going to learn along the way. And ultimately, you have to start somewhere. So our goal here today is to show you how we do this across each department within Ally.io, and some of the lessons that we've learned, sometimes painfully, sometimes because we spend all day studying OKRs as we have developed this process internally. All right, so now that I've taught you absolutely everything you need to know about OKRs, let's talk about where it all breaks and how you can keep that from happening. In order to do that, I want to finally introduce you to some of the people that I just mentioned and a couple more, and talk to a bunch of my colleagues from Ally.io. So in this moment, I am realizing that I should have teed up the Chicago Bulls 1990s introduction theme song. I think that would have been a ton of fun, but I may do it in post anyway. So let's see if I can at least kick off the first one. So, hailing from Bellevue, Washington, standing at, okay, I can't do it actually, Atul, because I've never met you in person. I don't know what your actual height is. But Atul, thank you so much for being here. You can do your best to live up to that incredible introduction, but please tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. From a height point of view, maybe I can pass as a point guard, maybe. So, yeah, my name is Atul. I work at Ally. I lead the strategy and operations group. What does that mean? How do we go faster, better, cheaper? And of course, OKRs are a key ingredient into that process. So thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Up next, we have Balaji, owner of the amazing ice cream store. I hope it's doing well. Thank you so much for being here. It's also very early in Chennai, so, 1,000 appreciations.
No problem, Kevin. And I wouldn't know a thing about making ice creams. So what I would is know about what I do, right? Balaji here. I'm the director of product here at Ally. I've spent about 9 years in the SaaS industry. Started out as an engineer, found my calling in product management, and never looked back since then. A big believer in finding meaning and purpose to what we do on a day-to-day in OKRs, even before I joined Ally, and Ally was just a natural choice for me in that sense. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to be among such a great set of people discussing OKRs.
Awesome. Thank you. And up next, representing our incredible customers, our Director of Customer Success, Julie Sloan. Julie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin. So hi, everybody. I'm Julie Sloan, Director of Customer Success. As Kevin mentioned, I am fairly new to Ally, but have my whole career basically been chasing customer experience. I have always loved to create experience with every job that I ever had and figure out what are the things that make our customers successful. Why do they fail? How can we help them succeed? And this journey of OKRs, I actually started at a previous company. We actually tried to start using OKRs, and I got started there, but now I'm living and breathing into it while creating a very intentional customer journey as our customers come into Ally and implementing them well and helping them adopt our software. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Joe. I'm excited for you to be on this conversation because you have one of the teams with one of the most important direct interactions with every single one of us, because your team is 100% focused on our customers' needs and their success. So thanks again for being here. And last but not least, Chris Pitchford, who always gets my above the rim references, diehard Toronto Raptors fan. I've made a lot of basketball references already in this webinar. But Chris, thanks for being here. Tell us a bit about yourself too.
I appreciate it, Kevin. Would it be possible that you could lead the introductions for all of our sales team's phone calls and meetings moving forward? I'm loving the energy. I think that would just create a wonderful customer experience. Pleasure to be here. Chris Pitchford, Vice President of Sales at Ally. I really focus on helping our customers implement OKRs, often for the very first time. So typically customers come to us with some understanding about OKRs. Maybe they've been doing them for a few cycles, but really are eager to learn and implement and mature their process. So before they get to meet Julie, I get the awesome opportunity to educate them as best I can and make sure that their journey starts in a great way and is handed off well to Julie. So thanks for having me, Kevin, and really pleased to be here with the rest of the team.
Yeah, perfect. I'm excited for the conversation. We've got some questions that I put together because I love the stories that you all tell about this stuff and the work that you've been doing around it. But then we also have some really great questions from the audience that we've collected over the past week or so. So excited to get to all of those, and let's dig in right away. So as functional leaders here at Ally, you all have dependencies on each other's work in order to hit our goals. And today what we're going to talk about is our OKR process, and one of the big pieces is A, how we mitigate those dependencies, and B, how we work together to make sure the overlap works in our favor and how we stay aligned in those areas. So Atul, I'd love to start with you and do so as we do with our own OKR process. So this was the first cycle with you at the helm of our business strategy and the OKR process as we set our Q3 OKRs. So I won't sit here and pretend that we've got everything all figured out and we've done it perfectly and by the letter, but I think it was pretty successful, and we're a young and growing company with big goals. So we've seen OKRs done a lot of different ways by customers, by folks that we chat with all the time, and even internally. So talk to us about how we do things here at Ally.io and what the process of writing our OKRs for Q3 was like, and how we roll it out throughout the company where the actual work happens.
Sure, Kevin. Yeah. Something you just said, I just want to reemphasize that, why I fell in love with OKRs during my previous job was the flexibility. Basically, you can make it your own. So you got to start somewhere, progress over perfection. So don't try to perfect it in the first go. And like you said, we are, of course, no way the process of perfect, but I would say it was pretty good. So there are two ways to do it. Like if you read books on it or practice it, it could be completely tops down. The CEO sits down, figures out what the OKR objectives of the company are and cascades them down, basically. So that's one way to do it. What we did was we went to the employee base, said, what do you think the top 3 to 5 company objectives should be? And the reason for doing that is there are people who are subject matter experts. They are seeing what's going on, whether talking to the customer, sales, marketing, product, whatever it is. And you want those signals coming back into the process, basically. And the second is enrolling the people in the process. When people are enrolled in the process, they feel empowered and it's their own process. Like it's not something that has been pushed down on them. So once we collected all that feedback, we surfaced it to the leadership team, mostly people on this call, functional leaders at Ally. And we said, this is a feedback from the employee base, and you come up with your own company objectives. And once they came up with it, we shared it with the entire leadership team and gave each person 100 points. Like award these 100 points either to one company objective that you feel very strongly about or distribute it amongst many. And once all that feedback came in, we collected it and figured out, okay, where the sentiment was pretty heavy on one or a few, or where people were really not very had a huge center of gravity on. So once we took all that feedback, gave it to the CEO and said, this is what the sentiment of the employees, your leadership team is. And for him, it is an input into the process because he's looking at the 3-year vision, 2-year vision. He's seeing what the investors are telling us. He's seeing where the market is going and taking all this feedback into the process. He came up with kind of 3 to 5 or I think 5 in total company objectives and the key results associated with them. And then we are a town hall, a company, all hands kind of a meeting where we kind of said, okay, taking a look at all the process, all the feedback, leadership team, these are our quarterly company objectives, basically. And while this was going on, it wasn't like everybody was waiting. Like marketing was working with sales and trying to figure out, like, as the company level objectives are going to be defined, we have to be ready to snap to them, basically. So it was kind of a 2 to 3 week process where there was a little bit up and down, there was a little bit parallel processing going on, and eventually we came out with something that we all feel good about.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciated about that process is that it was happening in tandem as we were working on some departmental initiatives as well. And it created some really strong alignment. As we allotted those 100 points across the board, I think there were very clear themes that came out of that because there was already work happening between this group and other people on the team.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So obviously writing OKRs is a time-consuming and important process because it defines the work that we're going to do, the projects, the tasks, the areas of accountability across every individual on our teams. And that either levels up to those OKRs, or sometimes there are tasks or projects that live outside of that. And all of those things need to be taken into account. So the operationalization, I don't know if that's a real word, and the definition work around moving this into production basically is where the rubber meets the road. And I want to talk about some specific examples that we've all experienced there. So Balaji, I'd love it if you could share a bit about the relationship between products and product marketing, and how you work with our director of product marketing, Jess, to make sure the work maps and we're focused on not just the right priorities, but also the same priorities in the right order at the right time. There are a lot of moving pieces that go into that, and making sure the work is mapped correctly.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So product being at basically at the center where needs all of these inputs from all of these different teams, right? And we kind of go out initially setting what our top level OKRs are and how it sort of aligns to our organization, see the top KPIs that we should own as a product. And once we have all of those KRs sort of defined, that's when we kind of look at the projects that needs to be sort of that should be aligned to those KRs, right? So once that input happens and the KRs are reviewed, so we kind of start coming up with, okay, these are all the feedback and these are all the projects. So how does it align to the KR, right? And how do we kind of really get that going? And we define a set of projects that needs to be done. Oftentimes what happens is all of these projects are in different stages, right? So there's a big bet that you're making, which needs about, which needs to be validated with our early set of customers, versus some feature would be in a stage where its initial adoption is done. We need to kind of go general and go from there. And then there's satisfaction and engagement. There's different stages of initiatives that, different initiatives that would drive different, outcomes. And each of these needs different level of support from product marketing, right? And if you look at something like an early adoption, it's about how do we get, once we have the research, product marketing, product works in parallel in that sense, right? So once we have that, how do we actually get our prototypes or the ideas that we have in our mind validated with our actual customers? And that's where I think product marketing plays a very, very important role. While it's if it's a feature that actually already crossed early adoption and into a general audience, so what are the channels that we should be looking at, right? And how should we be rolling this out, right? What is the best way for us to do that? Mm-hmm. So we have a different, depending on the size of the feature, the type of the feature, the stage that it's in, we have different plans for each of those features that we have. And we try to look at what level of product marketing and product overlap it needs, and what do they need from products in terms of artifacts and things to kind of do from their end, right? And we try to put those as milestones, right? As we try to build a calendar for that particular quarter and kind of look at, hey, this is where product hands off things, and from here, product marketing kicks off and does things. So we do identify that calendar and identify those as milestones, right? And it's really helped us, right? And one of the things we've also started doing for a couple of quarters now is the ability to set up projects inside Ally, right, and align it to KRs, which side of contributes. Yeah. If that makes sense, right? Yeah.
It makes a ton of sense. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is having used OKRs at different companies before, there's a huge disconnect between the goals and the objectives that we're setting, which generally live in a Google Doc or a spreadsheet somewhere, and the actual work that we're doing. And so when you don't map those things and have them, play nice together, they don't play nice together. So it's been a cool process watching product and product marketing this quarter, because there's sometimes a bit of a yo-yo where you go back and forth and say, oh yeah, this is what our objective is, this is what our key results are, here's what the projects are. Whoa, that's way too much work. So let's back up here and figure out what we actually can do and what we need to do. So awesome, thanks for sharing that. Julie, I'd actually love to hear a bit about what some of the challenges you hear from our customers are. And potentially, do we run into those same problems or challenges at Ally? And how do we deal with them here? How have you seen that happen?
Yes and yes. Okay. There's plenty of challenges. I think I can boil it down into 3 that we hear a lot. Effective communication being one. And I think that's like a life goal, right? Like if you have effective communication, you're going to be more successful at a lot of things. Unrealistic expectations is a second. And the third is writing great OKRs, but I'll back it up and say just writing good OKRs. So those are the 3. Around effective communication, it's really important for leadership to talk about the value of OKRs. So Atul mentioned there's a lot of reading material out there. There's different ways to educate around OKRs, but employees need to know why. Why are OKRs important? If you don't understand why, you're never going to get to the how or the what. So the why is really important, and then you kind of win the hearts and minds of the people that you want using OKRs. So why is super important. And a couple things about why that are pretty easy. It's like OKRs add transparency. And you'll hear all sorts of examples about that as we talk today. And one thing that I love is it aligns remote workers. We're all remote right now. And that's a really good one. So then you can get into the how. How do you organize around OKRs in your communication strategy? So having key stakeholders, having an OKR champion, even within a team, like who's going to be held accountable. So we're obviously working with people that use Ally. So who's the admin for your tool, to making sure that you guys are all aligned? Who's on tech support? And then, who are your leaders, managers, and users, and what's their role in the OKRs? When we look at setting unrealistic expectations, I think this is a big one, especially if you are, so at my last company, we were using KPIs, and we decided to also do OKRs to kind of help the individual contributor connect up to the company goal. And there's change management involved in that. So implementing change takes time. So that's the thing, as you come into this journey, you have to have a lot of patience. You have to have a communication strategy, and just don't set unrealistic expectations. So I see a lot of customers doing that. Companies will fail if you move too fast. Employees will fail if they write too many OKRs, which is actually really easy to do. So I think do less and accomplish more is one of the themes that we like to reinforce. Crawl, walk, and run. Celebrate small wins and just be adaptable. And then the third one around writing great or good. How about let's just start with writing OKRs. It takes practice. And it may take 2 to 3 quarters to get into a rhythm and a cadence where like, oh, hey, these are pretty good. And oh, look, we have alignment, and it's cascading down through the company. It's not just you, it's everybody. Everybody has trouble writing OKRs. And so if I talk about like the team, so customer success, we're a little abstract. I always think like, oh, Chris, you're so lucky. You're talking numbers. Like, I'd love to put up a number, and I can with renewals, but a lot of this stuff we're doing is a little bit abstract. It's connected to, perhaps product or marketing. And so what is the objective? So we took the approach, since we are really closest to the customer, we're kind of like, we should be the expert within Ally, right? So we looked at what are the challenges our customers have, and let's approach because this suddenly is our own challenge. So we put together a workshop. We spent 2 to 3 weeks basically coming together, looking at you know, what are all the things that we're trying to work on? Plus in our role, the customer is always the main priority. So as we're like on this path to get some things done and measure our key results, you know, it's like, oh, shoot, I got to go run and do this thing over here, which, you know, can take you completely off track. But yet then you remember, that's actually what that customer needs is aligned over here to my OKRs. So we workshopped, broke it out. I've got a trainer, you know, trainers, implementation team, customer success managers, somebody working on our customer success tech stack. And we just went boom, boom, boom. Everybody kind of wrote their own. We separately, we came together, we talked through them, and then we got to a place where, hey, this lines up pretty good. And we sit underneath, some of our metrics are actually sitting underneath sales. And so it was like, we're not siloed. We're actually really well connected. And that's the thing I love about OKRs. It just kind of brings everybody together.
That's something that is important and hard to get over, is recognizing how interconnected it is and that you can't have this fit neatly within a bucket. I think all of your points reminded me of something Miranda Nicholson of FormStack, one of our amazing customers, said on a webinar a few months ago that always gives me a little bit of peace. She said it takes 2 to 3 cycles before you're going to get your OKRs right. Because on paper, they seem so simple, but you're absolutely right. It takes a lot of change management, and it is really hard to do it well.
Can I just say one more thing? Like around the cycles, I've actually seen companies think that OKRs should be written just once a year. And it won't succeed. Like OKRs are meant to be flexible, and you really do need to have OKRs for every quarter. Now depending on your department, you might have one OKR that's on repeat for the whole quarter, or for the whole year rather. Mm-hmm. But really that flexibility of, and having that connection for individual contributors to really realize how the work they do rolls up, it's that quarterly cadence is really important.
Yep. Well, and we are living through a time right now where that has become true for almost every company in the world, that OKRs did not, or goals of any kind, did not stay true to what you probably said at the beginning of Q2. Yeah. So, Chris, Julie just mentioned how nice and neat it is to have numbers attached to your OKRs. Let's talk a bit about that, because I think in a lot of cases it's not true, as we have both learned. But there are some really cool parts of managing objectives around the funnel that bring our two teams really close together, and some areas where there's a lot of overlap between sales and marketing. So tell me a bit about why, from your perspective, from a sales perspective, this is important to you. To have that overlap, to have those handshakes, and let's talk about how it translates into actual work.
Sure, Kevin, thanks. And Julie, just in terms of our teams collaborating, you started laughing right away. Just in terms of our teams collaborating, I think really due to the initial process that Atul rolled out in this quarter and that he laid out on this call, is what led to that. And that's led to some strong collaboration between our teams as well, Kevin. Mm-hmm. So you and I both, Kevin, have, really have key results that align to the same parent, right? So when we think about examples for high growth teams, they might be things like achieve phenomenal net new revenue growth, right? Or when speaking about other revenue growth goals, you might think about grow revenue sustainably for expansions, for example, both of which are tremendously impacted by your team, Kevin, and mine. So ways to solve for this can be shared OKRs for more matrixed organizations, as well as dependencies, which you alluded to a little bit at the start, Kevin. So shameless plug on the Ally feature sets there. What can I say? I'm in sales. Now, you always want to have clear accountability. So shared OKRs and dependencies can be used sparingly, yet in a meaningful way if used correctly. Just really want to focus on that accountability. So some of the areas where marketing and sales tend to connect are really in the top of the funnel, Kevin, I think. So some of the key handshakes that happen where there is that clear accountability on what marketing aims to deliver and what sales commits to executing on from that delivery different acronyms are typically used to define these things: SQLs, SQOs, SALs, right? So finding the right area in the funnel, I think where both teams can connect on is really key, where we both have accountability. I think that's what's made us successful over the past few quarters. So, I get the pleasure of working with Sydney, our wonderful director of demand generation, on a regular basis. And I think we both pride ourselves on the data. So all of our KRs, key results, and really our handshakes are completely measurable. And they're all tied directly to some of the work that our RevOps team does, but really through Salesforce. And another shameless plug, these are connected all into our OKRs and Ally, of course. So we actually
just want a demo right now.
I know. I'm just going to switch over to my other screen. I wasn't prepared. Oh, hold on. So we actually meet regularly, though, Kevin, just to review each KR, sometimes multiple times a week, because often we might only have 2 key results over the whole quarter that are really, pushing the needle or moving the needle that we're partnering on. So something that's helpful that in running our meetings is just to review the performance is, when thinking about how we review our success week over week, just using dashboards for a tool at the senior leadership level. So when we want to talk about our success upwards as well as downwards and laterally to products and engineering teams, we have that ability to communicate both the data, the KPIs, how those relate to our objectives and key results, and the context, right? The actual communication around it, which is often just free form text, which is incredibly helpful when understanding how we're doing and really having that window and that one place to understand that progress. So that's what I would say, Kevin, in terms of our collaboration, dependencies, shared OKRs, and how we collaborate with marketing.
Yeah, it's one of the areas where I think having OKRs is the central component to our cadence in how we run meetings and how we talk to each other and how we think about the business becomes really valuable, because obviously your team can't be successful if my team's not living up to what our key results are and what our focus is. But also, we don't know that those are successful unless your team is successful. So there has to be that back and forth and that interplay. And being able to do that within our key results, within our OKRs, is something that keeps it very tied to what we're trying to do as a business and makes sure we never lose sight of that.
So for me, Kevin, honing in on that top of funnel metric, right? Having, collaboration on it, understanding exactly what it is, and having a commitment between our 2 teams is what's really helped, in my opinion. But the OKRs make it front and center. So every week we know exactly what we're marching towards. And I think that's what's been helpful for us. Yeah,
agreed. 100%.
Cool.
So Atul, everybody keeps talking about you throughout this conversation, so I want to bring it back to you here a little bit. And I do welcome the rest of you to chime in here, but let's talk about something you mentioned earlier on, and Julie and Balaji both mentioned as well, is the motivation piece. So do OKRs motivate teams? Just as a blanket question, but I think there's a potential for them to be demotivating sometime if they aren't written correctly, if they're overly ambitious. But how can we as a leadership team make sure the OKR process is motivating our teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, if done correctly, if written correctly, appropriately, I think they can be very motivating. But there are scenarios they can be very demotivating. And so if you imagine there are 2 kinds of key results that you can have, and they are at the 2 ends of the spectrum. One, you can have key results that are like you're committing to them. You got to hit them no matter what. It's the first order of business. And on the other spectrum are your moonshots, basically, like very lofty goals where you're trying to do things that are 10x. I think there needs to be a healthy balance. If you just make all the KRs commits, your employees, they are empowered. They want to overachieve. They want to do lofty things. So just if it becomes so mundane, like every month and every quarter you just keep hitting them, life is boring. It's not fun. While on the other spectrum, like if you make all the goals moonshots and not have very clear communication why they are moonshots, people will be like, okay, I keep missing them. It can be demoralizing. Going back to Balaji's ice cream venture, if he says like to his employees and his investors, his board of directors, like, okay, last month I did 40,000. This month I'm going to do 10 million. Employees won't believe him because they'll be like, what changed? Nothing changed. You didn't hire Kevin in Sydney to do demand gen for you. So that's not going to happen. Board will be like, yeah. So board will want to know what you're committing to. So if Balaji says like, this month I'm going to do 50,000 and 2 years later I'm shooting for 10 million and that's my moonshot and I need to do these things along the way to get there, then his employees will be like, yeah, I see it. And we are like passionate to get there. Let's hit 50,000 this month and start to build that machine that will take us to that 10 million goal. So I think that's where the empowerment, engagement, motivation piece comes in basically.
I would add projects are a really cool feature that we have in Ally, but even before I worked at Ally and doing OKRs, projects have always to me been, I mean, there's a lot of, you can have your objectives and your key results, but there's a lot of other stuff going on to actually reach those. And what does that look like? And having projects and knowing that there's work that, specific work that needs to happen to move those metrics forward, the objectives, is really important. And that's something where you motivate your individual contributors because everybody comes with unique skill sets, or maybe somebody wants to show their leadership skills. That's a great opportunity to ask someone to lean into a project. And you can surface that project in OKRs for the quarter, and they can actually see how their project contributes to the key results, which end up leading to the objective being hit. And I think that that's a nice layer to add into objectives and key results, just as a motivator. And I find that that's, people get kind of excited about the project.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I agree. We like to think tangibly. We like to think about, what can I do to actually help move that needle?
Yeah.
If it's just a number on a board, it's hard to take it seriously.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Great insight. So we have 6 audience questions that I think we'll be able to get to. There are a few others that we're going to follow up with you directly on. So thank you for submitting those. But I'm going to start with this first one, and some of these throw a few curveballs at you. So number one, are there times that OKRs need to be revised in the middle of the period that they've been set for? So if yes, what are the reasons and what are the repercussions of that change? So we teased this a little bit in the conversation earlier, but I think the interesting piece is the repercussions. So what does it mean if you're changing your OKRs mid-quarter too? Atul, I think let's start with you since you own this process for us.
Yeah, like, I mean, the overarching thing is like, again, the flexibility piece. Like OKRs is not like you set it and forget about them and like, no, we are going to hit this mission no matter what happens. And if past 2 quarters have taught us this, that yeah, there are external factors that you will get hit by, and you will have to figure out how to change course to a certain extent. And so yeah, absolutely, you should be flexible about that. I think from a repercussions point of view, just figuring out like what to deprioritize, what gets postponed, and the reason for that, and just making sure your employee base understands that, like why we are making those changes. So like the example we are using over here is an external factor, but there could be internal factors also. Just like you realize suddenly that for example, there is a customer facing process that is completely kind of breaking apart, and you got to fix it right away, and all hands on deck are required. And so that would be another example where you would want to kind of change course. But I would say it would be like just figuring out the priority, what gets pushed out, postponed to the next quarter, and making sure all the stakeholders are aware of that.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. So Julie, because you work with our customers all the time and you're helping them solve problems, what are some of the 3 must-win battles in order for an OKR program to be successful?
Oh, only 3. Well, we actually like to talk about the OKR Super Powers, which I think sounds kind of fun. And there's like 5 of them. Some of these are taken from John Doerr's Measure What Matters book. The 3 most important ones, I think, so that people can try to have success with OKRs would be alignment, transparency, and tracking. So alignment may seem obvious. You may think, oh, it's cascading goals and everything's connected, but that's actually not what I mean. Alignment, I think the most important part of having alignment is making sure that everybody understands the why behind OKRs, the value of OKRs, and is somewhat bought into that. Mm-hmm. That's like number 1. If you've got that, even most of the way, then you can worry about writing your OKRs and having that kind of alignment from a goal perspective. The next one is transparency. And I think that transparency is ally. Like, I don't know what else to say. I work here, but it's true. I've tried to do OKRs in the past, and it was my team used PowerPoint, another team used Excel. We got together as a leadership team every quarter and talked about our OKRs, and it was like, whoa, everything is siloed, and my goodness, no wonder we're not hitting goals. Like, there's just a complete disconnect. And so having a way to be transparent about the OKRs is super crucial, really, really crucial. And then tracking. So you've got tracking, to me, is rhythm of the business. It's great to have a system and alignment, but like, what are you going to do about it? It can't just sit over in a box. You have to actually make it part of the rhythm of your business each week. It has to be something that's intentional. It's part of your workflow. So whether that's a cadence of, making sure that everybody checks in on their OKRs every week, follows up, lets you know how their progress is going, or as a team, you meet weekly or bi-weekly. It's just a regular rhythm, cadence, and just becomes part of what you do, I think. So back to alignment, transparency, and tracking. Those are definitely the 3.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest lessons for me in joining Ally, is how important of a part of that rhythm of the business our OKRs are, and how valuable it is to have that framework and that construct. All right, Atul, I'm putting you back on the hot seat here because this one is specifically for a department that you oversee. So how can the people operations team effectively help business units to set their OKRs for their team?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. And I think Julie just said something where she was talking of rhythm of the business, basically. Like, there is like weekly check-ins or things like that. But OKRs, there is the employee aspect, the people aspect. And how do you connect people operations to business operations, basically? Like, if you think of from a people ops side of things, the goal of any people ops leader is like setting clear expectations with the employee base, making sure that they are engaged and empowered, basically. Now, where do the OKRs come in? Like, they kind of define what your objectives and key levels, not only at a company or a team level, even at an individual level. They kind of set a very clear expectation, like, this is what you're trying to achieve. And then through kind of conversations, feedback, and recognition, the CFR process, similar to the business rhythm, there is the employee manager rhythm also that has to be a part of that process. And as you get into your employee performance management, annual review, whatever you call it, while it is said absolutely correctly that these 2 things should not be very tightly coupled, but at the end of the day, the objectives and the key results and the initiatives, projects that the employee worked on, how do they feed into the performance review and the career conversations and things like that? So I think this is where these 2 things start to connect. And people operations has to be kind of involved in that process. Again, going back to the point, like setting everything to be a moonshot goal, that can be demoralizing. And just making sure there is a healthy balance of different kinds of goals. People are getting stretch assignments. So all these things play a role into connecting people operations and business operations.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So let's stick with the theme of motivation for a second. And Chris, I'm going to hand this one over to you. The question is, our sales department says OKRs are too redundant to the QBRs and forecasting and weekly pipeline reviews they're already doing. How do we mitigate that?
I've heard that one before, actually, Kevin. So often, I think because sales teams have quite evolved metrics and numbers that they track, that Julie so nicely pointed out earlier, they're a little resistant to adopt OKRs because we have some of the best sales infrastructure and software to support exactly how we're doing at all times, right? So it seems like there's a bit of a disconnect, but what we've seen success with is actually just building the OKR process into typical sales rhythm, right? So everyone does weekly stand-ups on the sales team, especially remote, right? In fact, you're probably doing daily stand-ups right now with team members to keep folks engaged. So in terms of our team, our weekly stand-up is longer. It's about an hour. And depending on the layers of management that you have on your team and how many groups you're managing, you know, the reports, your deck reports would each spend 5 to 8 minutes reviewing their OKRs, and you're really leading with OKRs in all of this, Kevin. And they'll focus on what they did, what they committed to last week, what they achieved last week, and then what they're going to do this week. And this is every week. So we get those 12 detailed check-ins over the course of a quarterly cadence. And then in terms of our daily stand-ups, those are a little different. Those will be more focused on how we're progressing on the commitments that we made at the start of the week, right? And then we're using other, you know, analytics-based tools instead of an OKR tool. But OKRs are certainly leading the discussion. In terms of forecasting, Kevin, that was, I think, part of the question, right? In terms of forecasting, if your Salesforce hygiene is up to date, then you should be able to forecast effectively. So I don't see how OKRs hinder accurate forecasting in any way. If anything, they support it and keep your priorities for all of your team members top of mind. So I don't see any challenges there. In terms of my team, something that we started doing about 2 quarters ago was we actually broke down our OKRs monthly, just to keep, you know, I think once COVID hit, wanting just to be super tight on everything in and everything out of the business made a lot of sense. So we've seen some additional success with hyper focusing our OKRs. I know nobody else, I think maybe on this call, does monthly, but that's just we're experimenting. We'll let you know how it's going, team, but I think it's going well. And then lastly, the QBRs, I think, was a part of that question, Kevin. We think QBR, you know, they only happen once a quarter. They're an awesome opportunity for AEs and different team members to come forward with all of their learnings and ideas, and they get to chase the big, hairy, audacious goal, the bag, right? So they can stipulate what those awesome initiatives they want to work on over the quarter and set those moonshot targets. And ideally, you know, in our case, we'll have leadership team members all there to provide feedback and give insight. So I think they support the typical sales model, you know, the typical sales infrastructure, Kevin, but I think they can actually, when led with OKRs, they actually enhance it tremendously.
Yeah, I agree. So 2 things I want to chime on with that. One, when you switch to the monthly cadence, we did something similar on the marketing side because we want to maintain alignment and we want to be able to keep those the metrics relevant, the OKRs relevant, and the handshakes similar, which has been great. And nice. I love the way you have set that framework and talked about it as intrinsically connected to regular sales management tactics, because I think we think of salespeople as they're focused on their one singular number. And a lot of times that is the most important thing they can focus on. It's the biggest value a single salesperson can bring to a business, but they want to see how that connects. They want to see how it connects to the overall vision and mission. They care about the company's success as much as anybody. And being able to do that through an OKR framework adds a different value for a sales team than just managing your pipeline in Salesforce or Insight Squared or whatever it is, and you're just seeing your individual performance.
Yeah, I think, you know, when your managers are doing their stand-ups with their teams, right? And maybe a typical daily 20-minute stand-up with your team might use the I eat red meat framework: information, education, recognition, motivation, right? Why not? And that's a good framework, but instead we just tend to use OKRs to just lead our discussions instead. So that's, I think we're just swapping out opportunities to lead with OKRs versus typical other processes that work as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Balaji, same question on the other side of the coin. Question that says, our engineering team feels like OKRs are too redundant with their agile structure, using Jira as a tool. What do we do?
Yeah, great question, right? I mean, I think we have realized that internally, we have seen that growth of how we started out with the journey of OKRs and how it has evolved over time, right? I mean, I would kind of put this in 3 stages, right? The first stage being Jira predominantly being this planning tool, right? Essentially, you kind of manage your agile sprints, what you do. So you come up, there's a sprint, and then there's a list of tasks you do, sprint list of tasks you do. And once in a sprint, you kind of plan what you're doing there, right? So it's this never-ending thing that goes on, right? But typically what's not connected is, why are you doing that? And what's it connecting to? Are you kind of doing the right thing, right? And this is something, that is why it's important to connect these two together, right? I mean, we took a shot at, hey, what could make it motivating for people? Stage 1, right? We kind of went out saying, okay, we have to kind of connect what we do to OKRs, and then we'd have goals like, hey, do this with high quality, right? The number of bugs, and do this with high predictability. There's certain dates that you have, right? And then how much are you innovating while you're doing this work? And we tried to connect with this, and it's kind of felt, it went okay, but it's still sort of siloed, right? I mean, in that sense. So that's stage 1 for us. And then we sort of evolved saying, okay, let's have these projects, right, at the team level where everybody's sort of contributing to, and then there are metrics of the product it contributes to. And we started kind of writing these, and when we do make check-ins to those in terms of the projects that we have, and so there's this high-level OKRs at the top, which has all of those KRs and metrics, and then there are projects. There's sort of nothing in between, right? That's our second stage, right? I mean, it kind of brings in that alignment, right? But it's still not sort of connecting it together, right? I mean, we work on projects, metrics are lagged, right? And we continue to do that, and it worked well. I mean, it brought that alignment to people to kind of see, hey, when they're making these check-ins, they're doing this, hey, whether it resulted in. I think stage 3, which is where we are in now, is where we found the maximum value, right? So essentially what we do is we kind of do the KRs, and we also kind of bring in the notion of input metrics, right? So the reason is, typically your KRs are lag metrics. That is something you would know at the end of the cycle, right? Whether you have done it or not. But there's also this need to kind of define things to say, are we getting closer to that on a regular basis, which is where I think we went into the practice of reviewing this, like Chris mentioned, right? On a regular cadence, we do this week on week, right? Where every feature team kind of comes up with, what did we do in the last week? What was planned and what did we accomplish? And what did we have to do, right? And I think it's been a game changer in that sense, right? So essentially we come kind of saying, this is what we accomplished, this is what we are going to do, this is what is going well in terms of input metrics, even though we are not yet achieved the lag metric. And it also provides an opportunity for everyone to start connecting what the mission is. Are we doing the right set of things every agile sprint, you call it, right? Because if you're doing this only in Jira, you won't get that context, right? I mean, there's this leadership team sitting, guiding you on, hey, did you think about this? I mean, this is fine, but do you eventually think by going on this path, you'd get to that project or not? All these tough questions that comes. And it's great that we see that it's actually improved our focus in terms of how we are building out things, right? As a product and engineering team, how we are collaborating and how we are keeping our focus on results while we are executing on our projects, right? So that I think the third stage, which is where we are in today, we kind of have these OKRs connected, OKRs and projects connected to OKRs, and sort of go into this rhythm of reviewing those, right, every week, and sort of critically connecting what we are doing to the OKRs on a regular basis. That's been the game changer, right? And yeah.
That's awesome. And shameless plug for some great Ally content. We have an OKR maturity model that talks you through how to move from stage to stage as you move up in your OKR sophistication. I will make sure that gets shared when you get access to this recording. One final question, and it's focused on marketing, but it's something we've chatted a lot about already. So if you have an OKR for a marketing team that depends on the product to build a new product or feature or launch, and in turn, the product team wants the marketing team to market and grow their new product or feature or launch, how do you handle that? And I think there are two answers to that we've talked a lot about today. Number one is make sure there is alignment during the writing process. So one of the things that I think we did better than we ever have this quarter is keeping product marketing and product aligned, and marketing as a whole and product aligned throughout our OKR writing process, and making sure we were mapped on at least the big priorities. So what marketing needs to get done that has dependencies on product, and what product needs to get done that has dependencies on marketing. And from there, making sure it's part of the rhythm of the business. So we now have different syncs with different groups from your team, Balaji, once a week to talk about different parts of those core objectives, those core focuses, and making sure everybody is operating as one team. So I think it's easy to use OKRs or any goal setting framework as an excuse to fall into silos. And it doesn't have to be that way. We're all trying to work to these core objectives, to this core mission and vision as a company. And as long as you keep that central and top of mind for everything that you're doing, I think you're in decent shape. And it's going to help you work closer hand in hand with the different departments. Speaking of different departments, it was amazing chatting with you guys tonight. Thanks, or this morning, Balaji. It was great to talk through some of this and be able to share and reflect on some of the things that I think we are getting better at every single day, and some of the challenges that we, like everybody else who is watching this, faces. So thank you again. Thank you all for checking out this webinar. If you have follow-up questions, if you have interest in learning more about this process, please reach out. We are easy to find. Check out our website, request a demo, find us on Twitter, wherever it is. We are more than happy to talk about this stuff till we're blue in the face, clearly. Julie, Balaji, Atul, Chris, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This was a very fun conversation.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And clear. Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right.
That was long.
I was like, do we leave? Do we leave now?
Yeah, you can just...
She was like a regular call. All right, see you guys.
Yeah. Goodbye.
That was awesome. Good stuff.